Welcome, GCSE Geography students, to a truly epic explainer. Today, we're staging the ultimate showdown of the extremes. Think of this as a massive clash of environmental titans, the Arctic versus Antarctica. We're going to completely master these crucial exam topics by putting these two frozen arenas head to head. So grab your notebooks, because by the end of this battle, you're going to know exactly how these seemingly similar worlds are actually polar opposites in, well, almost every way imaginable. Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for today. We'll be judging this showdown across 6 main categories. We've got 1. The polar opposites. 2. Climate and weather. 3. Features of the land. 4. Features of the sea. 5. The main flora. And finally, 6. The main fauna. Right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the polar opposites, looking closely at their geographic foundations. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute most fundamental difference between our two combatants. If you look at the north, the Arctic is essentially a massive ocean right in the middle, and it's surrounded by the landmasses of North America, Europe, and Asia. But down south, Antarctica is the exact reverse. It's a colossal, completely isolated landmass, a true continent that's totally surrounded by the vast southern ocean. Honestly, this is the ultimate geographic why behind literally every other difference we're about to explore today. The Arctic is an ocean tightly hugged by continents, while Antarctica is a lone continent isolated by an ocean. Keep this core physical contrast in the back of your mind, all right? It's absolutely foundational for mastering this exam topic. Moving on to Section 2, climate and weather. This is definitely a tale of extreme cold. Now, you might think both poles are equally freezing, right? Well, you'd be totally wrong. Back in 1983 at the Vostok Station in Antarctica, the temperature plummeted to a staggering minus 89.2 degrees Celsius. I mean, wow. That is the lowest temperature ever officially recorded on Earth. Now, what's really interesting here is when we actually compare the data. While the Arctic can occasionally reach a relatively balmy 13 degrees Celsius in the summer, Antarctica seriously struggles to even break minus 12.3 degrees on a warm day. And check out those winter temperatures. Antarctica is just in a different league of cold. Plus, it's technically the driest continent on the planet, getting less than 3 centimeters of precipitation a year. That makes it an extreme polar desert. Add in a super smooth, icy surface with barely any friction, and boom, it's also the windiest continent. So why is Antarctica so much more extreme? Well, it really comes down to a perfect storm of environmental systems. First off, it has a much higher elevation. Second, it just gets battered by these violent things called Katabatic winds, which are basically dense, freezing winds accelerating downhill from the interior. And third, as we can see modeled here, it is completely trapped by the Antarctic circumpolar current. This massive oceanic and atmospheric barrier just constantly whips around the continent. It locks the freezing air in and keeps any warm air completely out. The Arctic, on the other hand, ends up sharing its weather with the surrounding continents. Okay, Section 3, Features of the Land. We're looking at the ice sheets and permafrost that make up the actual ground beneath the ice. Antarctica is basically a towering fortress. It's an actual physical landmass where 99% of the ground is utterly crushed beneath 2 massive ice sheets. Because this ice is up to several kilometers thick, Antarctica boasts an average elevation of 2,835 meters. That actually makes it the highest continent on Earth. The sheer weight of this ice is so immense that it literally pushes the continental rock down into the Earth's mantle. Crazy, right? And hidden beneath all that ice is some pretty extreme geography, including the 3,500-kilometer Transantarctic Mountains and, believe it or not, an active volcano named Mount Erebus. Now, contrast that with the Arctic terrain, which is a completely different arena. Aside from places like Greenland, it's mostly dominated by relatively flat coastal plains. Crucially, the ground here features something called permafrost, that's soil that stays permanently frozen right beneath the surface. When the top layers thaw out during the warmer spring months, the meltwater has nowhere to drain, so it creates literally thousands of small, marshy, boggy lakes. And while Greenland does have an ice sheet, it's kind of tiny by comparison. It holds about 9 times less volume than Antarctica's icy armor. Moving right along to Section 4, Features of the Sea. Let's examine the sea ice and ice shelves that really define these marine environments. So, the crucial point for your exams is memorizing this exact definition. An ice shelf is a thick, permanent floating platform of glacial ice extending from a landmass out over the ocean. This is absolutely vital because it's a massive point of contrast between our two regions. The Arctic is covered in freezing sea ice, sure, but it has absolutely zero ice shelves. Antarctica, however, is totally defined by them. Take a look at the massive gray areas extending off the coast here. Those are the famous Ross and Ron ice shelves. These are gigantic chunks of the continental glacier that have just spilled off the land and are now floating on the Southern Ocean. Some of these things are well over 100 meters thick, effectively extending the actual coastline of the continent. All right, Section 5, the main flora. Let's look at plants in the extreme. The difference in biodiversity between these two places is just staggering. Up in the Arctic, those slightly warmer summers allow for the taiga, which are coniferous forests on the southern edges, and the vast open tundra. The tundra actually boasts over 1,700 species of plants, sedges, and dwarf shrubs that hug the ground to escape the bitter wind. But then, look at Antarctica. It is just an arena of barren rock. Only about 1% of the entire landmass is ice-free. That means plant life is limited to a few incredibly hardy mosses, lichens that literally hide inside the microscopic pores of rocks, and exactly 2 species of small flowering plants. That is the whole shebang. Which brings us nicely to Section 6, the main fauna. Let's talk about the apex polar survivors. Let's move to our ultimate geographic rule. Seriously, if you learn nothing else from this explainer today, just memorize this. Polar bears live in the north, penguins live in the south. Please, I am begging you, do not put penguins at the North Pole in your exam answers. These iconic creatures evolved in completely different systems, and they literally never meet in the wild. Actually, here's a fantastic piece of trivia for you. Because Antarctica's land is so ridiculously hostile and barren, its largest strictly land-dwelling animal isn't a bear or a wolf or anything like that. It's a tiny, wingless midge insect called Belgica antarctica, and it measures less than 1.3 centimeters long. And yeah, it's wingless, so it doesn't just get immediately blown out to sea by those crazy Katabatic winds. Because the physical land offers almost nothing, Antarctica's truly magnificent larger animals, like the emperor and gentoo penguins, or the prey beater and Weddell seals, are entirely dependent on the highly productive marine food web. They really only use the icy fringes of the continent or the ice shelves to breed and rest. The ocean is their actual life support system. The Arctic, by contrast, is deeply physically connected to major continents, and that means it is absolutely teeming with large land mammals. You've got caribou, muskox, and Arctic foxes migrating across these massive expanses. You have true apex land predators like polar bears and Arctic wolves roaming around. Plus, because of those thawing permafrost lakes we talked about, the summer tundra just explodes with massive swarms of insects. It's a radically different, far more populated ecosystem than what you find in the isolated Antarctic. So we've broken down this epic showdown. The Arctic is an ocean surrounded by land, teeming with terrestrial life and melting permafrost. Antarctica is a towering, freezing, isolated continent surrounded by ocean where life barely clings to the sea. But I want to leave you with one absolutely critical geographer's question today. If everything we've looked at, from the ice shelves to the tundra to the polar bears and the penguins, is so deeply interdependent on these extreme cold conditions, what actually happens to these highly specialized, incredibly fragile environments as global temperatures continue to rise? I really want you to keep that systems-level thinking in mind as you prep for your exams. Good luck studying and keep exploring.